Hi guys, it's Jess from Honest Fiction, and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I am going to be sharing your favorite fantasy romances of 2024. Alright guys, so I film this video twice a year and it is one of my absolute favorites. So I asked over on my Instagram for you guys to tell me the best fantasy romance book you have read in 2024 so far. And part of the reason why I love this video is not only do I get to share my favorite fantasy romance books, but I also got so many amazing recommendations for fantasy romances that I hadn't heard of before. So there is quite a list of books. I will give you a spoiler-free synopsis of every book, and then if I've read the book, I'll give you my overall feelings. But I am so excited, and we have a lot of books to cover, so let's get into it. If you are unfamiliar with my channel, I post new videos every Wednesday and Sunday. If you haven't yet, please like and subscribe. You can also hit the notification bell to be notified whenever I post new bookish content. You can also check out my Instagram, Goodreads, and Patreon, all linked down below. With all that out of the way, let's talk about these fantasy romance books. Alright guys, so starting off, these books are in no particular order, except I saved my favorite book for the very end. So if you're looking for a certain book, there are timestamps in the description. I also have affiliate links for every book that I mention. So the first book I actually have not read yet. It is Commanding Flame and Shield. So I have an audiobook of this. One of my subscribers was super sweet and sent me the audio for either my birthday or Christmas. I just haven't gotten around to it, but I just read the plot synopsis and I need to get to this ASAP. So we're following this guy who has this like idealistic, perfect life. He's a great businessman. He has a really beautiful fiance, but he's been plagued with these nightmares every night. And then I believe in like a different realm, we have this girl, I believe her name's Alaria, starts with an A. And she has this magical ability and she keeps dreaming about this guy. So eventually she confronts him and is like, are you going to accept your prophecy or what are you gonna do? So it goes from there. Like I said, I have not read this yet, so that synopsis probably didn't make a whole lot of sense. But I heard that it's very perfect for fans of Throne of Glass, The Bridge Kingdom, two of my favorite series. So I am so excited to pick this book up. And next up is a book I read back in December, and I had such a hard time landing on a rating. So we have The Hurricane Wars, and this is an adult fantasy romance. It's very political, and it's very Star Wars coded, and that is because it started out as Reylo fanfic. Now, the reason I had a lot of issues with rating this book is because I love Reylo fanfic, I love Star Wars, I grew up watching it, and I really did enjoy this book. However, I don't know how this book would hold up if you aren't a fan of Star Wars already. I feel like the world building, although this book does do a lot of world building, it is rather confusing. So I also really struggle with summarizing what happens in this book. But we're essentially following this girl who there's a war going on, and it's essentially the light side versus the dark side. The light side, there used to be these powerful people that were able to harness light, and they were killed off by the dark side. However, the supporters of the light side are still kind of like fighting this battle in their like honor. So our main character, I think her name is Taliesin. I might be completely wrong. It's been so long since I read this. But she actually secretly harbors this light ability, and she's kept it a secret. That is until there's a battle raging and she has to save somebody. The prince of the dark side sees our main character use this light ability and immediately is like, I have to kill her. So he goes, they get into this epic battle, but for some reason they just can't kill each other because they have that like hate you, love you chemistry. And it's their romance. There is a forced arranged marriage that happens, so it has a little bit of forced proximity. And the ending of this does end on like, not a crazy cliffhanger, but definitely an ending where you want to pick up the next book. So while there were parts of this book I really enjoyed, I'm not sure how someone that didn't already love Star Wars and kind of understand like the vibe, not understand the vibe, but like, you know, guys know what I'm saying. So if you read this and you didn't know it was Reylo fanfic and you really enjoyed it, let me know down in the comments below, because I do want to recommend this book. There was so much going on. However, I did really, really enjoy the romance. All right, so this next book seems to have had a resurgence because I read this, I think, last summer whenever the audiobook first released, and I feel like not a lot of people were talking about it, and now I'm seeing it all over Bookstagram, which is great because I really enjoyed it. And it is The Book of Azreal by Nicole. So I actually got this signed at a Polycon, and I will say this author is super sweet, so just throwing that out there. But anyway, the story is following Diana, and she lives in a world where the gods have abandoned the humans, and they've gone off to sleep like in a different realm. So when this book starts off, we see that Diana's sister has been mortally wounded. So Diana is just begging that someone come and save her sister. Well, a demon shows up and is like, hey, I will save your sister and you. However, I'm going to turn you both immortal, and you are essentially going to have to work for me for the rest of your eternal life, and you might turn into a monster. And Diana is just so desperate to save her sister, who's the only family she has left, and is like, bet, let's do it. So then we fast forward, and it's been, I think, like hundreds of years or whatever, and Diana is now working for this demon, and this demon tells her, hey, I need you to go find the Book of Azreal. Well, while Diana is trying to do this, she accidentally awakens one of the most powerful gods in existence, and he comes back to Earth and is like, hey, you are now my prisoner, and we need to find this book. So it's their romance, and it's really good. I will say the ending of this book is also so unbelievably shocking, but at the time that I read this book, there wasn't an audio yet for the second book, so I haven't picked up the second book yet, and I really have to do a reread of this before I pick up the second. But highly recommend. This was such a fun time. And this next book is one that I haven't read yet, and it kind of skirts the line between fantasy romance and monster romance, but I wanted to include it just because it seems perfect for this time of year, kind of going into the summer months. So it is Whispers of the Deep. This is by Emma Hamm, and I believe we're following a girl that lives in this underwater city that has recently been established. And one day when she is out going on a solo mission, she runs into a merman, and this merman is trying to eradicate the humans from this ocean, so he takes our main character captive, and then a bond starts to form between them. So, like I said, sounds really good. It's been quite a while since I've read a merman-mermaid romance, so I'm definitely picking this up. Hopefully if an audiobook releases, but if not, probably in the summer. All right, so this is why I love filming these videos. So this next book I had never heard of. However, it sounds like so much fun. I probably will wait until spooky season to read this just because it definitely has those vibes, but it just sounds so good. So it is Someone to Build a Nest In, and this is following a monster who is a shapeshifter who, after being attacked by monster hunters, is found by this very nice and sweet human, and the monster starts to become attracted to this human and is like, this is the perfect person to build my nest in and lay my eggs, and the eggs will come and erupt out of this human. So really kind of messed up. But anyway, as the monster starts to fall more and more in love with this human, she realizes that she doesn't really want to do this. So then it turns out that the human's family are all monster hunters, and the main human is as well, and they are trying to hunt down a shape-shifting monster that has cursed their family. So it's really like the monster's plight of, I don't want to tell my girlfriend that I'm a monster, and also her family is hunting me for something I might not have done. So it is LGBTQ, monster romance, and it just sounds like I said, such a good time. So I will definitely be reading this in the fall. And a lot of you said this next book, and it was also one of my favorite reads so far this year, and it is The Everking by L.J. Andrews. There is an audiobook available. I loved this book, and I had such high expectations going in, and I'm so happy this book lived up to all of the hype. So we are following this girl who knows that her father has imprisoned the Everking under the water by her realm. And one day she goes out with, I believe, her cousin, and she accidentally releases the Everking, who then kidnaps her, takes her to his underwater palace, and is going to use her as a captive and a hostage to try to get revenge on her father. But then a budding romance soon blossoms, and it goes from there. And I've pitched this as, if you like Shatter Me and you're obsessed with Aaron Warner like I am, I think he's one of my absolute favorite book boyfriends, think of Aaron Warner, but a pirate version. So he uses love as both an endearment and a threat, and I live for that. So I love The Everking so much. Definitely one of my top. I am a little bit nervous because a few of you have said in the comments that you didn't love book 2 as much as book 1. As soon as I actually think the audiobook is available, but I will be reading book 2 very, very soon, hopefully at the end of this month, if not early June. But either way, this first book is phenomenal. And I was actually kind of surprised because 3 of you said Throne of the Fallen was your favorite fantasy romance for 2024. And I read a little less than half of this book, and while I didn't have any major issues with it, it just wasn't holding my attention, so I put it down. But since a few of you have said you really enjoyed it, I will pick this back up because, like I said, I had no issues with it. But this is the same author that wrote Kingdom of the Wicked and that whole series, and then the Jack the Ripper series. I definitely preferred the Jack the Ripper series to Kingdom of the Wicked. While I did like the first book, the books after that kind of went downhill. And I will also say, while I love Kerri Maniscalco's writing, and I think she does detail and world building very well, her transitions drive me insane. She is the only author that I can tell her books right away because she really changes up what is going on from page to page without any explanation of how a character got from point A to point B. Read Kingdom of the Wicked and see if you pick up on that, because it was driving me bonkers. I didn't notice it as much with this book. It happened once while I was reading, and I was like, darn. But anyway, so this story is set in the same world as Kingdom of the Wicked, and we are following Envy, who we meet in that series. You don't have to read this series. You can read this as a standalone. And I can't remember if I said this, but this is adult fantasy romance. Those other two series I was talking about were YA. But anyway, we are following Prince Envy, who's one of the 7 princes of hell, and he is trying to save his kingdom. And he ends up in this entanglement with a human who's also a thief, and they have to work together to survive, like, the perilous underworld and kind of help each other while also somewhat hating each other. Very similar to Kingdom of the Wicked. So I will give this another try, but I'm super excited a few of you have really enjoyed this book. All right, an overwhelming amount of you said When the Moon Hatched by Sarah A. Parker. This was the second highest response I got on that Instagram story. I think I ended up getting, I know I got over 20 because I got 20 responses for my last book that I'm going to talk about. But yeah, there was a lot that said When the Moon Hatched, which also is making me feel a little bit better because I am currently in the middle of reading this. I'm not in the middle. I am currently 3 chapters into reading this book when I am filming this video. And I will say it is very, I don't even want to say slow paced because there was a lot going on in the very beginning. I did have to re-listen to the intro twice just so I was sure I picked up on everything. Sarah A. Parker's writing, and I keep using the wrong word. I keep saying lyrical. It's not that it's lyrical. She just uses a lot of words to say one thing, which isn't necessarily bad. It's just when I'm going from reading a lot of straightforward, like I just finished a Mafia romance readathon, so going from that to this is a little bit jarring. However, the world is beautiful, and the writing is lyrical, it is whimsical, and it's very, very wordy. So I also, when I downloaded the audiobook for this, it came with a PDF of multiple pages of like a pronunciation guide, and like there's a lot. However, it's obviously worth it if so many of you are saying this is the best book in general that you've read in 2024. Like I had people say not fantasy romance, literally just the best book they have read. So I have very high hopes for this book. This is my Patreon pick for May, so I have to finish this book by the end of the month, and I'm really looking forward to it. To give you an idea of what this book is about, and like I said, I'm not very far in, and I didn't really look into the synopsis because I don't want this book ruined for me, but we are following, well, it starts off in this world where there are creators, and the creators have very unique personalities and very unique abilities, and they created these dragons, but they didn't expect these dragons to go up into the sky and then fall as stone. And then we kind of fast forward and we're following this girl who I believe is an assassin, and I believe she is going to get kidnapped by somebody, and it's going to be like a forced proximity, enemies to lovers type vibe. And then also the main guy in this has been compared to Cassian by so many people. So many people have DM'd me being like, if you like Cassian, you'll like the hero in this. So unfortunately, Cassian's my least favorite Bat Boy, so I don't know, but I'm very curious about this book, and I hope I love it as much as all of you, because I don't know, there's so much hype surrounding this book, and so far, it's taken me a while to get through it. I feel like I'm just rambling now. Anyway, everyone loves this book. If you have not picked this book up yet, highly recommend. It has dragons. That's really all you need to know. And next up, I had 2 different books from the same series. However, neither was the first book in the series, so I'm going to just discuss the first book because, one, I had never heard of this series before, and it sounds really good, And 2, I don't want to give away spoilers accidentally by reading the synopsis for book 2 and book 4, which were the books that were recommended. But the first book is The Marionettes, and this seems to be a fantasy romance, but also it is following vampires and witches, so probably skirts the line of paranormal romance. However, I do want to include it in this video, although I know they are like 2 separate things. But anyway, this is following a witch who wants to join a vampire clan. And she is a blood witch, so this should be very easy for her to do. However, when she starts having to go through the trials that would allow her to join these vampires or be ruled by these vampires, she starts to find out that people aren't exactly things aren't exactly what they seem. And people aren't exactly who they appear to be. And it goes from there, but all I know is I think it's a 4-book series. And yeah, I had never heard of it before, but I just added it to my TBR. Probably won't get around to this until spooky season, but it sounds like a really fun time. And next up, it seems like an overwhelming amount of people, myself included, have discovered Carissa Broadbent in 2024. So I got so many responses of different Carissa Broadbent's books. We had Daughter of No World, Slaying the Vampire, Conqueror, and Six Scorched Roses, but I've talked about all of those books very, very often on my channel. So a lot of you also said Serpent and the Wings of Night. Now, I have been saying I'm going to reread this book so I can finally read Ashes and the Star Curse King for over a year now, and I still haven't. My TBR is out of control, but I did absolutely love this vampire fantasy romance. If you are unfamiliar with this story, we are following this girl that was found when she was an orphan toddler by the king of the vampires, and he takes her back to his home where he raises her as essentially his child, and she's growing up amongst vampires. So when she comes of age, she decides that she is gonna fight in this tournament known as the Kajari, and it is a fight to the death, and the winner will be granted a wish by the goddess Nyaxia. So when our main character enters this tournament, and I will say this book starts with her just being dropped into it, she realizes that she is kind of outmatched, so she has to team up with a vampire and some friends from a rival vampire group. And it goes from there. And it was so good, so much action, very fast-paced. This is a great book to start if you're somewhat new to fantasy romance, because you're not going to want to put this book down. So highly recommend, and I'm so happy so many people are loving Carissa Broadbent. And next up is a book that I had been seeing around Bookstagram, but I didn't even realize it was a fantasy romance, and I just read the synopsis and immediately added it to my TBR. So thank you for the 2 people that said this was their favorite read of 2024. So it is Trial of the Sun Queen, and I believe we are following this girl who has been, I don't know if she's been a slave, but she's been essentially miserable under the rule of the Aurora King. And then she finds out that she is going to compete against 9 other women to try to earn the love and favor of the Sun King. However, these 9 other women do not want to deal with this girl, and they're obviously going to try to take out the competition. And the story goes from there. So either our main character can get the Sun King to fall in love with her, or she is going to be returned to the very angry and malevolent Aurora King. And it goes from there. I believe this is the first book in a series, and there is an audiobook available. So this is definitely a book I will be reading in June. It just gives me those summertime vibes. And next up is a YA Gothic fantasy romance duology. And this is another series where I feel like it had a resurgence in popularity, because I read the first book, One Dark Window, when it first released. I got the Fairy Loot edition, I think 2 years ago, honestly, at this point, and decided to read it. And I didn't love it, but so many people are loving this duology. And on paper, it sounds like it has everything that I would love in a fantasy romance. It is dark Gothic. We are following this girl that I believe in this world, from what I remember, you are killed if you possess magic. And our main character ends up touching a tarot card and accidentally brings this magic into her, and it's like a monster, and she's trying to keep it hidden so she isn't killed, because like I said, if you have this magic, you are killed. Unless you're part of the royal family and then you're allowed to use tarot cards. Yeah, sorry, I forget a lot of this. But anyway, so our main character ends up running into a highwayman, and together they have to try to stop and uncover this mystery, but also our main character is still trying to keep this monster a secret, and this monster has quite a personality. And it goes from there. So I think I ended up rating the first book 3 stars or 3.5, so I didn't hate it. It just wasn't a standout read, and I didn't feel the need to pick up the second book. I actually vlogged reading it, so I'll leave that vlog in the cards in the description. If you want to check that out, it is an older video, so please watch it with grace and be nice, because it's a little rough. But overall, yeah, I didn't love the first book, but maybe the second book is really good, and if that plot synopsis sounds good to you, I highly recommend checking it out. And next up is another book that I hadn't heard of, but it got a decent amount of responses, and apparently it was one of the top books in the Goodreads Choice Awards for fantasy romance. I don't typically check those out just because I normally don't agree with them. However, it seems like you guys really like this book, so I will add this to my TBR. I don't know when I'm going to get to it, but it's called The Hanging City, and we are following this girl, I believe her name is Lark, and she has the power to instill fear into others. If you've read Fortuna Sworn, it kind of sounds like the main character from that series. And because of some circumstances, she has to flee. And she ends up going to this city, known I think as the City of Trolls, where the fact that she can defeat these monsters is seen as invaluable. And then she has to kind of navigate her alliances, and apparently there's some sort of love interest. And it sounds good. If you've read this, let me know down in the comments. What did you rate it? What did you think? Just because I haven't seen a lot of people reviewing this book, and I'm quite intrigued. All right, so I was slightly flabbergasted when I saw this book as a response, just because I feel like this book I have only seen in a negative context. Anytime someone brings up this book, they are saying how they didn't like it, they DNF'd. And I've never seen anyone say they really enjoyed it, despite the fact that it does have almost a 4-point rating or a 4-star rating on Goodreads. So it is Lightlark. I have not picked this book up yet. However, I might give it a try. Not just because of the response. I think there was only one response that said Lightlark, but also just because it has almost a 4-star review on Goodreads. So there are people out there that like it. So maybe I'll be one. But this, I believe, is actually a YA fantasy romance, and we're following this girl who, all I really know is she has to engage in these trials against other groups, and she's part of this wildling group, and she has to lie, hunt, and steal in order to survive, and I believe there's some sort of enemies to lovers romance. But there was lots of discussions regarding this book last year, and yeah, it just seemed like a lot of people were not a fan. But if you've read this, let me know. I know I keep saying this with most of the books I haven't read. Let me know down in the comments what you guys think, and if you're familiar with my reading, if you think I would like it, because I'm willing to give it a try. And not only did a decent amount of you say Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros, but I was super excited when I saw a lot of you also said Iron Flame, just because I know a lot of people did not enjoy Iron Flame quite as much as Fourth Wing. I loved both books. I am in agreement. I did like Fourth Wing slightly more than Iron Flame, but I think I gave Fourth Wing 4.5, 4.75 stars, and then Iron Flame 4 stars. I liked both books. But if you are unfamiliar with Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros, everyone was talking about this book when it released. We are following Violet Sorrengail, and she is this girl that grew up her entire life believing that she was going to become a scribe because she has this chronic illness that makes her ligaments very, very weak. So she's not going to do a very tough position like her mother, who is a general and a dragon rider. She's going to become a scribe like her father and also help her community that way. That is until she comes of age and her dragon rider mother is like, nah, not a kid of mine is going to become a scribe. You are going to compete against other cadets to become a dragon rider and hopefully survive long enough to cross this parapet, bond with a dragon, and gain magical abilities. And it goes from there. So this book is very, very easy to read. It kind of feels YA at times in terms of what I feel the writing and the characters. These characters come off rather young to me. Now, there is spice in this. I know I've compared it to YA, and people have come in the comments and been like, there's spice. There is spice. This is an adult fantasy romance. I just mean in terms of rating and accessibility, it feels a little bit younger. However, I still loved this book. The love interest in this is top tier. I can't even go into details why, but I really, really enjoyed this book. I think it is worth all of the hype, and I am so excited for book 3. And of course, no fantasy romance list would be complete without SJM. So all SJM series were mentioned. However, I feel like I talk about ACOTAR and Crescent City ad nauseum at this point. So I'm going to focus on Throne of Glass. Now, pretty much every Throne of Glass book was submitted as a response, except for the first one, which I thought, oh, actually the first one and Assassin's Blade. Those weren't picked, but someone said Crown of Midnight, which is not one of my favorites, but I love that people really enjoyed it. A lot of you said Heir of Fire, Queen of Shadows. One person said Kingdom of Ash. I feel like a decent amount of people are reading this series for the first time. If you're unfamiliar with my Patreon, I am hosting a read-along on my Patreon that I'll link down in the description below. But if you're unfamiliar with Throne of Glass as a whole, this is following Celaena Sardothien, and after working as a slave in Endover, she is taken by Caol, who is a guard, and brought to the Prince of, oh my gosh, Dorian Havilar, and she ends up becoming his champion in these trials where all of these assassins have to compete, and whoever survives, I believe, will earn their freedom. And there's so much more. So Celaena has to uncover all of these mysteries. She meets these different friends. And the first two books are not my favorite. However, Heir of Fire is fantastic. One of my favorite books. And all of the books after Heir of Fire are 5-star reads. They are all, except for Tower of Dawn, but they are all so unbelievably good. And please excuse my Tower of Dawn hate. I'm not a fan of a certain character in that book. But overall, I love this series. It is so full of action and romance, and the side characters are just divine. And I will say, please give it at least until Heir of Fire, because the first two books feel very, very YA. Not that that's necessarily bad, it's just as you progress, it becomes much more new adult, and just, it's so, so good. So highly, highly recommend. And next up is a book that I personally have not picked up and probably don't have plans on picking up just because it is urban fantasy, and also it's a bit of a comedy, and I don't love rom-com fantasy romances. I also didn't know this was fantasy romance until looking up the summary and getting these responses. But it's called Assistant to a Villain, and we are following this girl who ends up being a personal assistant to like one of the world's most evil villains, and then starts to harbor a little bit of a crush on this villain, and I believe it goes from there. But I heard it's very funny, like laugh out loud funny, and like I said, urban fantasy, which I am not the biggest fan of. It seems like every fantasy book that I rate fairly low ends up being urban fantasy, and also I think it's workplace romance, which also is not my thing. But if you like all of those things, this book has really, really good ratings, so you'll probably really, really enjoy it. And we are down to the final three. So next up is Feathers So Vicious. This is a dark fantasy romance duology by Zander. This is the same author that wrote King of Flesh and Bone, that has the breaking leg scene that I talk about a lot in my videos, just because it was so unhinged and wild, and I was like, what is going on? But anyway, Feathers So Vicious, I did really enjoy this first book. In this world, there are humans, and then there are ravens, and these ravens are seen as evil, and they look like people, but they're able to turn into ravens. And the only way to find out if someone is a raven is to torture them until they either die or turn into a raven. So very similar to like the witch trials back in the old days. But anyway, our main character ends up being kidnapped by two ravens. One of them, who is super deadly, gets off on torture and is just like the epitome of evil. And the other one who's a little bit of a softie, but also is into some like interesting stuff in the bedroom. But anyway, they both kidnap her, and they want to use her to get back a raven that was captured by her family. And it goes from there. So, like I said, this is a duology. I've only read this first book. I actually heard conflicting things. So I wasn't sure if this was Wide Shoes or a love triangle. Someone said that it was Wide Shoes. Another person said it's neither, but you'll understand at the end. So I don't know, but either way, this first book was awesome. So I will definitely be picking up the sequel, and check trigger warnings, but if you like dark fantasy romance, definitely pick up this series. And this next book was also one of my favorite books so far in 2024. However, it is a roller coaster, and I was cackling when I was reading the submissions, because a few people did say this is their favorite fantasy romance so far in 2024, but it seemed like they had to justify it, which I totally understand, because when I explain why I like this book, I am trying to justify it as well. But someone said, how does it feel, ... just because of the ending? Another person said, maybe, how does it feel, ? Like, I'm unsure. So this book, it's wild. And it's not, I feel like now I'm making it sound like it's crazier than it actually is, but it's just not at all what I was expecting. And the ending is the best ending I've read in a fantasy romance book. I have never been so caught off guard by an ending. And just because of that, this book jumped so high in stars because I had to reassess the entire book because of the ending, which is one of my, I love that. I love it so much when an author is able to do that. But we are following this girl, I believe her name is Callie, and when she was younger, she ended up believing she saw a fairy, and because of this, she's been obsessed with animals that have wings. So she, now that she has grown, is trying to save this moth that is endangered, and she knows this moth really enjoys a certain type of mushroom. So she moves to where this mushroom grows, and one day when she's out trying to find these moths, she ends up in the Unseelie Court. And she immediately is almost killed multiple times by the prince of the Unseelie Court, and at one point he throws her in a dungeon with a very peculiar tree monster. And things happen, and it was wild, and it happened. So anyway, after that, she pretty much is just trying to survive and trying to decide who she can trust. She also has an affinity towards animals, where animals really trust her, and it was just such a fun read. I've talked about this book also, but the vibes of this book were very reminiscent of Fortuna Sword, kind of dark, gothic. I loved the Unseelie Court, and I am so excited. I actually just downloaded the audiobook for the sequel to this, which I will be reading immediately after finishing When the Moon Hatched, because I need to know what happens. But yeah, definitely check trigger warnings, but this is such a unique fantasy romance, and I really loved it. And one person submitted their response seconds before that story was going to expire, and they said Manacled by SenlinYu, so obviously I had to include it. This was my favorite book of last year. It is Harry Potter meets Handmaid's Tale fan fiction. It is one of the best books I have ever read in my entire life. It has every emotion you could possibly feel. I laughed, I cried, I ugly sobbed, I cringed. Definitely check trigger warnings. There is graphic violence on page. I was not expecting it, but oh my word, is this one of the best books on earth. So this is following Hermione, and it's essentially what would have happened if Harry Potter had lost the war against Voldemort and was killed. So Hermione is put in this sensory deprivation chamber, and when she emerges, she finds out that Voldemort has started a magical breeding program because purebloods their magic is waning. So she is given to Voldemort's High Reeve, who we find out is actually Draco Malfoy, and he has to impregnate her, and it is their story. And it's dark. It is so dark, but it's so good. So unbelievably good. So if you have not read this yet, you can, I believe, still find it on the website Archive of Our Own, but I also believe that SenlinYu has been picked up by a traditional publisher and will be publishing this, just removing all the nods to Harry Potter. I'm not positive, but I'm pretty sure that's happening. But this physical copy was actually made for me by a friend. So I always get comments when I post this, where can you buy this book? You can't buy it. It is fan fiction, but you can read it, I believe, still online. So I will have a link down in the description below. And last up, we have not only my favorite fantasy romance book of 2024, but the vast majority of responses I got were either Spark of the Everflame, Glow of the Everflame, or Heat of the Everflame, or someone just saying the entire Kindred's Curse saga. So my favorite is Glow of the Everflame, which is book 2, but obviously I cannot get into the plot of this without ruining what happens in book 1. So book 1 is following Diem, and she lives in a world where there are descended, and the descended are the ruling class, and they're the ruling class because they were descended from gods. So they have all of the power. Well, Diem's mother is a healer, so she is able to go into this descended area where humans typically are not allowed to go, and Diem is also awarded this privilege because she is training under her mother. Well, Diem's boyfriend is part of this human rebel group that wants to take down the Descended because they are being treated very unfairly, and some of the Descended are known for being cruel and just killing humans. So really, this first book, after Diem's mom goes missing, Diem has to decide what side of this war she wants to be on. Does she want to join her boyfriend and kind of this rebellious group to take down the Descended, or does she want to trust the Descended and try to find out what happened to her mom? And it goes from there. And this is the slowest of slow burns I have ever read. I have not read the third book yet, Heat of the Everflame. The audiobook was just released, but like I've been saying in this video, I'm so behind on my TBR. So I will hopefully be getting to that audiobook in June. It is over 1,000 pages. Most of the books in here are quite chunky. I will also say the first book, Spark of the Everflame, was an okay read. I think I gave it 4 stars, but it's probably 3.754. However, you need that book, obviously, to experience the glory that is Glow of the Everflame. I love this book so much. So please, if you are a fan of fantasy romance and you haven't picked up the series yet, it seems to be such a favorite, and I really love it. All right, guys, that is it for your favorite fantasy romances of 2024. If there is a fantasy romance that you absolutely loved that was not mentioned in this video, please let me know down in the comments below. I will definitely check it out. And I'd like to say a huge thank you to my Paladin protectors, Amanda, Erin, Leslie, and Kat. Thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for supporting my channel. And I'd also like to say a huge thank you to everyone who has watched this video. And I said this already, I post new videos every Wednesday and Sunday. And if you haven't yet, please like and subscribe. I will see you all next week. Bye.